I'm Dave Kennedy, a UX researcher, and this is UX Pursuit.
Welcome to UX Pursuit, a podcast dedicated to the unique stories and journeys of UX practitioners, how they got where they are today, what hurdles they overcame, and what advice they have for those currently pursuing UX. I'm Tim Bridgham, your host, and my hope is that these conversations might help and inspire those who are currently in their own pursuit of a UX career. I met Dave in grad school, and one of the first things I noticed about him was the astute and thoughtful questions he asked during class. It's no wonder he became a researcher. Through our conversation, I learned more about his extensive design background and how and why he ultimately chose to pursue a research career, at least for now. Well, Dave, thanks so much for taking time to chat today and to share your story. I guess let's start where most stories start, at the beginning. How did you get into UX, or where did it all start for you?
Well, first of all, thanks so much. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. So I found out about UX while working as a design producer back in 2010 at Microsoft. At the time, the design producer role was a new role that they were trying out. It was a hybrid of art direction and project manager. And while I was there, I had heard from several coworkers about the human-centered design program that was being taught at UW.
Got it.
Yeah. I had heard all about it, and I just thought it was super intriguing to hear about a program that was designed to find out what people think, what was useful and what was important to them as a way to create really thoughtful and impactful designs.
So how did you get into the Microsoft role? Like, where did you come from? A project management background or from a design background, or what led you to that Microsoft role?
Yeah. So prior to my time at Microsoft, I had spent over 10 years working in various different creative fields. At times, I've been an image retoucher. I was commercial photographer. Graphic designer was a title that I had. Art director was probably my most recent title that I had on the creative side. And the last job I had on the creative side was art directing pitch videos for an ad agency. And when I was around 2010 or just before 2010, there were a lot of businesses that laid people off because there was just this kind of drop in the tech market that started around 2008. And, so somewhere between 2008 and 2010, I too was laid off and kind of scrambling like everybody else was to find a job, and leaned on all my creative friends to find a position at Microsoft. And they were really interested in me because I had this management background years and years prior, managing a print shop. Okay. And then all the design experience. And so they said, we want you to try this out and see what happens. And so I tried that out for a little bit over a year. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then you kind of hear about UX, and while you're working at Microsoft, was it something like, oh, that's interesting, or like I'll come to that later, or what was sort of next after? It sounds like that job at Microsoft was only for a short period, or maybe a year or something, you said?
Yeah, it was just under 2 years. And, I had never heard of the human-centered design program prior to Microsoft. And this kind of idea of research-driven design. My my background is mostly working in small agencies that may use a little bit of market research, but mostly it's, creative people going into some form of boardroom and creating a creative think tank to come up with an idea based on, based on maybe something they had read in a magazine or something they saw on TV or just some, strange dream that they had.
Yeah.
And so when I heard about this at Microsoft, there are a bunch of people that mentioned it to me separately. And I was super intrigued about this idea of, like I said, asking people questions about how they wanted something designed or what would be useful to them. That was just something that was unheard of, but it was also something that I was excited about because, I'm a pretty inquisitive person, and, years and years in design, I had always felt that was something that was missing, that check-in on a deep level with the people that were going to actually be using the thing that you were designing.
Yeah. So when were you like, okay, I'm going to go try to get some sort of degree or some sort of certificate to understand how to do this? Or what were the next steps in sort of that pursuit or that, your journey to becoming a UX researcher?
Yeah, well, it's not a super straight line. So
never is, right?
Yeah. So after Microsoft, I was seriously considering looking at I had heard about the human-centered design program, and I heard about their master's program, and I'd been thinking quite a bit about, how design seemed to be changing, or at least the way that I saw design at Microsoft. It seemed to be going in this direction of really focusing on this idea of creating empathy for the users and using that empathetic knowledge, for lack of a better description, to design. And I thought, okay, well, I've been in design for this long. I should probably jump into that and join the club, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into the degree and what it would take to go through the program. But as I was looking into it, I also found that the University of Washington had an amazing graduate program, an MFA program in photo media.
Okay.
So I got really interested in that and decided to apply to get my MFA in interdisciplinary arts, specifically focusing on photography and video. And so I went in 2011 and graduated from UW's MFA program in 2013, and I spent 2 years focusing on being really creative and being an artist. And the following years after that, I did a 16-month residency run where I was traveling around the world and really pursuing my art career. And somewhere towards the end of that 16-month run, what I thought, this idea of being an artist and being out on the road and pursuing the art craft, what I thought would be this amazing dream was something that I really, for me, was something that I decided that I really didn't want to continue doing. And so, of course, I'm thinking about next steps and what that's going to look like for me. And that's when I applied to the HCD program to get a second master's degree in human-centered design. And the reason is because it just ever since I was at Microsoft, it just always sat there in the back of my mind. I was like, that sounds really interesting. It sounds super creative in this way that, I hadn't approached creativity before. And to make the connection from my MFA, one of the thing that I wrote my master's thesis on, one of the main titles of my master's thesis was the significance of knowing. And the whole idea is we gain a better understanding of people by knowing more about them and walking in their shoes. But we also build this empathy for this person. And through this process of gaining understanding and building empathy, we are no longer, or our fear of them usually either goes away or lightens up a little bit. And I wrote that as a broader theme when discussing topics of racism and looking at topics of social class, because that's what my master's thesis was mainly focused on, is those two topics.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope I'm not rambling here, but I was really thinking about that and thinking about this program and how important that was to me. And so I decided to jump off my 16-month residency run and apply to the program and get that second master's in human-centered design.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think you're, I guess I was curious, you said you started looking at grad school options, and then it sounds like this photo media master's of fine art that sort of bubbled up to the top, or at least it took priority. Is that a fair statement to say?
Yeah, it took priority mostly because I think of myself first and foremost as a creative person. Okay. No matter what, it doesn't matter what job I have. I'm always somehow imbuing the job with creativity, and even when I'm not required to do something creatively in my day job, I always seem to have some sort of creative pursuit that's outside of work. Okay. And so, I had prior to that time, I'd been showing my work, and a lot of my work was, early works. Looking back on it now, it's really easy to do this with hindsight, but early work for me, a lot of it was focused on this idea of either showing an expanse of an emotion in one photograph by photographing multiple images of the same person interacting with themselves or showcasing their various emotions that they could have at once. Okay. Or really just focusing on one moment in time. And so even then, this idea of kind of really wanting to focus on what other people think and really share other people's stories was really important to me. And so when I was making that work, I had several people say to me, wow, you really should do more of this. You should maybe think about going to get your MFA. And so when I was looking at the human-centered design program and I saw that they had this photo media program at UW, like I said, creativity is the thing that I value probably the most. And so I wanted to make that a priority before looking at any other programs or looking into any other options.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So, but I'm curious, going into your HCDE master's degree, were you thinking, oh, I'm going to be a UX designer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I I thought, of course, I'm going to be a designer. I had so many different design jobs, for over 10 years plus, and it seemed like a, a no-brainer to me, that's just what I was going to do. But, the HCD program requires you to take, classes that are specifically geared towards research, and even the ones that aren't specifically geared towards research, you end up doing a lot of research in and writing research reports about. And so through that process, I really fell in love with research. I really looked at it from this kind of philosophical academic pursuit where I get to have a better understanding of how people think about the products they use, the spaces that they inhabit, and help other people improve their designs. And that was something that was really intriguing to me, to be able to be on the front lines of that. And I felt that it would be really valuable to me to learn that in school. And the more that I did it, the more that I just fell in love with it and wanted to just do that as a profession and try it out for a while.
Cool. Yeah. So you kind of fell in love with research, which is great. My story is a little similar, I guess, but partly too, I feel like I just don't have the artistry or the artistic skill of some of these designers that I see out there, or I just maybe I'm just not patient enough to train myself in it. But I also more fell in love with the idea of talking with people and spending that time researching and investigating. And I'm just a super curious person in general. So, but I had that design knack or background a little bit, not nearly as expansive as yours, but so that's interesting to hear. So then I'd be curious to understand what else or where you went next after finishing your master's degree in human-centered design and engineering.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So
because I'm sure lots of people are like, okay, cool, I have my degree now. What's next?
yeah, that is a very good question. So technically, I didn't finish my degree until December of 2019.
Okay.
The way the ACD program works is you can, and I'm sure a lot of grad programs work this way, is that you can finish that program over the course of 5 years if you want, or you can sail through it in 2 years. You really have some flexibility, and I had a couple credits left in that last in the fall of 2019 that I was working on. So I didn't really finish it until then. But prior to that, I felt like I was done in June of 2019. And although I didn't have enough credits to get my degree. And so I started looking for work as a researcher, because I really, like I said, fell in love with it and just kind of loved this idea of being able to affect design so early in the stages in that way. And, and another thing I forgot to mention is that the thing that I really love being able to do is take that research and build recommendations for the different teams that I'm doing research for. And it's really fun and fascinating for me because I get to have these conversations with people as a researcher while having the ability to talk design, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in answer to your question, I started looking for research jobs, and the truth is that I had several people look at my resume and they said, "Well, what are you doing looking for a research job? You have all these years of design. Um, we're not going to hire you as a researcher." And it was really a shock to me because when you're in the HCD program, a lot of what we talked about was this idea of research and UX needing people of all different experiences and all different walks of life, and really the value of that in UX, and the value being that you get to have these different voices and different points of view approaching research and design to make it more informative and make it more interesting. And so I was kind of surprised by that, but I kept looking, and eventually got my first crack at doing research professionally at Blink, and contracted with Blink for several months, and just really loved the culture of the company, and felt like they'd be a perfect fit for me because they're a research and design agency, and I know that one of their goal is to somehow bridge that gap between research and design within the agency, and really kind of bring researchers into that design fold and designers into the research fold. And I wanted to be a part of an agency that was looking at research and design in that way, and looking at it. I was also interested in an agency that wasn't afraid to think in those terms, because oftentimes you go to work for a company and they really want to silo research or silo design.
When you were kind of continuing on your search and you were hearing, oh, you should be a designer, did you sort of adjust your pitch or adjust your resume or adjust how you sort of went after trying to find a research job, or did you just kind of continue on until you found the right place?
A little bit of both. I definitely adjusted my pitch by really focusing my resume and my my professional website on the research projects that I had done prior, or either research projects that I was continuing to work on or research projects that I did in school. And I really put those first and foremost in those two areas. And so I think that helped a lot. And I think, like for those people getting started that are looking for tips, I think one of the things that really helped was to not just say, "Oh, I've done research on project A, B, and C," but in my resume to include, short, 1, 2, 3 sentences that describe the type of research that I did or the type of project that it was. And I think that really helped. But yeah, I think it also helped to, find a company that was more research and design focused rather than just research focused.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, then I think you got a full-time job at Blink, is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, I forgot to finish that story. So I started and like I said, I really liked contracting at Blink, and I knew that there was an opening coming up, and so I went into the big offices and I said, "Hire me now." and everybody at Blink is so nice that they just said, "Okay."
It was that easy, huh?
Yeah. No, it wasn't that easy, but I did in all seriousness build a relationship with several of the directors there in my time as a freelancer, and really worked hard on showing them that I could do the job, and also was super inquisitive about the job and while showing my interest in it. And when that job opened up, I just, worked really hard on, at least for Blink, they ask you to put together a presentation to talk about your projects. And I had already did that to some degree for the contract role, but
Right.
I kind of did that again to really emphasize my background while really showing off who I was as a person, while while not being afraid to emphasize my creative and artistic background and talk about how I think that relates to the world of UX and how that could possibly relate to research.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to ask, you mentioned sort of creativity being something that, whether it's in your job or just like your life, it's one of the things that you always want to have, woven through your life, maybe is a better way to describe that. But I think it's really interesting that you mentioned sort of trying to showcase who you were. And so I'd love to, tell me more about what you did or how you go about showcasing like you in conjunction with the work that you've done.
Yeah. So, that's a great question. So, to me, I guess I just back up and say that I think some of my design friends that aren't into UX would be shocked to hear this, because they have they have this kind of idea of what a researcher is. But I think creativity as a researcher is a really must-have attribute. And that doesn't mean like that as a researcher, you need to be able to create a beautiful piece of artwork or be an amazing graphic designer. For me, more so, it's being able to think creatively of ways to ask questions, especially when you're in the middle of a interview script and you realize that you're not really getting to the meat of your client's goals. And so you have to really be able to think on your feet and be willing to kind of be mobile in that way, with your thought processes of how you're going to reformulate a question or pull something out of somebody who's just giving you these straight one-word answers. I also believe that designing a research session is super creative. And when you're presenting findings and putting together a presentation for those findings, there are a lot of creative opportunities for researchers if they're willing to take them. For me, I'm a creative person, and I also teach art every once in a while on the side whenever I can and whenever I have time to do it. And so in school and as a professional researcher, I've kind of gravitated to this emphasis whenever I can and whenever it feels appropriate of creating these participatory design sessions. And so I use my creativity to build, like, for instance, a good example is I created a digital whiteboard that had all these pieces of a design, and it was a design where you were somehow asked as a user or participant to take all these pieces and show me how you would put them together in a design that would work for you when thinking about how a search engine would work. And so I got to design on my end by thinking about all the different pieces that would be involved in this design. And I got to design how whiteboard would be presented so that, it would make sense to the participant as far as like where, which cubby holes they were pulling different parts of the design in. And then the participant got to design with me and talk it through and talk through why they were putting certain parts of design in certain areas. And in that process, I got to ask them what was important to them and why they were placing things where they wanted to place and how they wanted those different sections of the design to work. And so that's how creativity might show up for me on a research project. And when I was interviewing for the job at Blink, I really kind of talked a lot about that and talked about the importance of design for me and how, my academic background as a teacher and being able to instruct people and walk them through whiteboard session aided in that process, and my background as an artist aided in that progress and designer. And so I really kind of just put together all those different, experiences and drew out the connections for the people who were interviewing me so that they could understand my thinking and my thoughtfulness to, how I got from point A to point Z, so to speak.
Yeah. Sounds like you're with that participatory design project that you're kind of came full circle from that Microsoft experience you had where you were just starting to hear about this idea of, getting feedback to inform design. And then it, finally you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of funny to think about I started hearing about HCD now over 10 years ago. And I hadn't really thought about it in terms of time. And to think that I'm just about rounding my first year, my year one as a working professionally as a researcher.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned creativity as a big kind of piece
sure
of the research or of the skill set you have. And you've talked about empathy in some of your creative work earlier in your career. What are other skills or qualities that you think make a good, UX researcher or a good UX practitioner, whether you're in design or research?
Oh, I mean, I think somebody who is an inquisitive person, you kind of mentioned this earlier. I think somebody who is has this natural ability to ask questions and be curious, I think is really important to the field. One of my sayings is that an interesting person is someone who is interested. And I really do think that by being interested in the things that are around you, different communities, being willing to read or somehow mentally walk in somebody's shoes, I think that having that openness is really important to working in UX, and especially being a researcher, because we're often being asked in UX and research to help clients understand their target user's mental model of how they think about things and what's important to them. And so, when you start to go down that road of trying to find that out, oftentimes it's not as simple as asking somebody, well, what do you like about this website or app or whatever it is that you're testing? A lot of it is being able to ask those secondary and tertiary questions, and that includes the classic, tell me more.
Yes, I'm a proud proponent of the tell me more.
Oh yeah, that's a big one for me. But I do think that um, that ability to be inquisitive and is really an important part of it. Because by building inquisitive, it comes back to those other things that I was saying, which is also allows you um, to build empathy for that person, but also create empathy for others to work from and understand their target users from.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's not only just for the end user, but you're kind of helping build empathy of the end user for those folks. For us in a consultancy, for the clients who maybe don't have that skill well honed yet, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, and when you're on the design side of things, if your creative director comes to you and says, we really need to change everything in the design palette to be more blue. And as a designer, you might be like, man, I just spent hours on a color palette that was a little bit more purple or a little bit more red, and if somebody says we need to kind of, throw everything in the blue hue, it might be annoying. But if they said, you know what, we just did research and our research shows that our target market responds more to blue, and because blue makes them think about sunny days and makes them think about Caribbean waters, then the designer might be more inspired and less annoyed to make those changes.
Before I ask sort of what's next in your journey, or maybe thinking about what you might want to do next or what you might want to focus on, I did have one question about being a freelancer and just sort of what was that like going out into the world? I don't know if you were looking for contract gigs or it just sort of you were looking for full-time and contract sort of hit first, or what was that process like?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Taking things back to the beginning of this podcast, I kind of mentioned heard about UX and human-centered design while I was at Microsoft. So, and then after everything that I told you about, which is I went to grad school and to get my MFA and went on this residency run, I spent, during that 10-year period of time while I was doing all that, I was already freelancing.
Wow.
Like I had freelance picking up different jobs in the creative field. And so it was something that I was really used to. And when I was getting close to finishing school and thinking about working professionally in UX, several people had suggested that one of the best ways to break into the field would be to approach it through freelance. And because, as I mentioned earlier, people were looking at my resume and they were curious to why I would just want to, make a switch, as they called it, from design to research. And so it's much easier for a company to kind of take you on for a 6-week project and try you out and see how that goes versus investing a lot of money in you as an employee and then realizing that you're not quite a right fit. And so, that process for me was relatively easy to do because I had that experience as a freelancer. And it was really a natural thing for me. But when I heard that Blink was hiring, I liked working for them so much, and I liked the people so much that I thought that this might be the first place in over 10 years that I want to be a full-time employee at.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I've definitely seen in my tenure at Blink, lots of contractors come in and do great work and then shift into full-time roles, and know that that's a great avenue into like a full-time gig, as you were just mentioning, or even just a chance to like hone some skills and then maybe go somewhere else. But
Yeah.
that's just not in my sort of, I didn't go down that pathway. So I was curious what that's like, but you sounds like you just have lots of, that was sort of your life for a long time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And being a freelancer has a lot of benefits, but can be really hard sometimes because, you might get done with a 6-month contract and then be floundering trying to find more work. And so, for some people who are really good at saving money, that's great because you take the time off and do fun things while you're looking for more work.
Mm-hmm.
And other people who aren't great at savings, it can be really rough.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Nice. So you started in this journey, learning about UX, something that sort of nagged at you maybe for, several years, even through your MFA and being a full-time artist or pursuing that art passion. Now you're in it. Now you've been doing it for a year. Is it what you expected? Do you feel like it has met your expectations? Yeah,
it's met my expectations and more so. I mean, I think that, when you're in school, you get to kind of cherry pick your projects to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to kind of know what the real world is going to be like. And so now that I've been doing it professionally, it's kind of hard to even think about what that prior time was like, because I'm just in it and I'm enjoying it, and it's really fun. I mean, as at least at Blink, oftentimes you're working on a new project every 6 to 8 weeks, if not faster. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's fun about that for me, because I'm a lifelong learner, is that I get to learn about a new topic every 6 to 8 weeks. And so, I think that keeps things really exciting for me. And in a way, it feeds my interest in UX, because I get to, I'm not staying, there's nothing stagnant about what I'm doing. I'm not working on developing something over the course of 5 years.
Right.
Those projects are great too. But right now, where I'm at in my career, it's really nice to be able to, take a peek at all these different areas and learn new things.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that, maybe in the process, maybe there'll be something that I see that I think, oh my God, I really want to, keep working on this and coming back to it. Maybe it's a different topic, researching bicycles or wearables or, how faucets might work or whatever it is. It's, maybe there'll be that project that comes my way. I'm like, yeah, this is it. This is where I would love to be for the next 5 years. But for now, it's really super fun to be able to dip my toe in a lot of different spaces.
So it sounds like, next for you is just kind of keep getting exposed to different topic areas. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, I think my short-term plans are to, explore what it's like to be a UX researcher and explore those different avenues. But my longer-term plans is to eventually work my way into a position where I'm a head of design. Like managing a team of researchers and designers.
Oh,
And so my my years of experience working as a researcher will hopefully eventually pay off to be able to have those conversations with both those teams and help bridge those gaps.
cool. Yeah, that'd be exciting. I'd be excited to be a part of that design team or a researcher around that design team down the road.
Yeah, I think it'd be really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
Like I said, it'd be nice to be able to circle back around and then and somehow manage both those areas.
Totally. Yeah, I think as one thing that I learned along the way in my kind of journey is that my past experiences when I thought, oh man, maybe these don't really mean much, or that I can't really use these because I've come from a different background, or I've spent time studying things that didn't totally correlate, but then I've learned along the way that those do shape me in ways and give me insight into things, and I can leverage those in creative ways, and I may be able to, like you're doing, come back and sort of apply that background plus what you're doing now into some super cool, exciting career or job.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that if you're willing to have some creative thinking around your own professional pursuits, and you're also meeting employers that can think a little bit less non-linearly, then you get those two to match up, and you find that there's some pretty interesting opportunities out there. And I mean, I will say this: I do think that with UX becoming more and more popular, that there is the idea of somebody who does research for a couple of years and then does design for a couple of years and then back to research or whatever. That's becoming more accepted in the field, because people are seeing more and more the value of having an ex-designer on their research team or an ex-researcher on their design team. So I'm excited to see that and know that's something that exists.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was going to say, any other sort of important insights that you feel like are important to share, but I guess the last one was pretty great, but any others? Don't want to put you on the spot.
Wow, you're really squeezing it out of me.
I am trying my best.
Yeah, thanks. When I think about UX, I think about research, I think people will surprise you. And what I mean by that is I can't tell you how many times I thought, as a researcher, somebody was going to say one thing and then say another. And I'll sit there and say, you know what? I know all the answers to this research question. I don't even know why we're asking 10, 20, 30 people. And then I start interviewing people and be like, God, like most of those people disagree with me, or that one person really surprised me. I thought that they were going to say this.
Yeah.
And so I think that insight, I guess, is to be open to those surprises and accepting of them, and maybe in a way hinge your curiosity to that, in the sense that like you can look for those, use your curiosity to look for those surprises and create moments that allow for that space to happen.
Yeah, well said. So, Dave, if people wanted to learn more about you or connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, if they want to look at my art site, they can go to davekennedyimages.com. And then if they want to look at my work site, my professional work site, they can go to davekennedicreative.com.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Multi-channeled there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to cover all bases.
That's great. Awesome. Well, Dave, thanks so much for taking time to share your story and your insights. And yeah, it's just super interesting to hear, about your shift, in some ways from creative to research, but also knowing that you are really leveraging and holding on to that creative side and you haven't sort of transitioned away from it as maybe some people thought you were doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Tim. And I appreciate being part of this and look forward to checking out your show.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again. A big thanks to Dave for taking time to be on the podcast. I love how he talks about leaning into curiosity and bringing creativity to his research process. And I think it's super cool that he's able to do the research while leveraging his design background and skills to contribute to the overall design process. When he's leading a team of researchers and designers in the future, I know they're going to do some fantastic work. Definitely take some time to check out both of Dave's websites. I think his art at davekennedyimages.com is fascinating, and you can really see the breadth of his work at davekennedicreative.com. Thank you for checking out the podcast. If you're thinking about or pursuing a career in UX, I hope you find these discussions informative and helpful. You can find UX Pursuit wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now, and if you know others who are pursuing a career in UX, please tell them about the show. To learn more about me or the show, please go to uxpursuit.com. Do you have UX career questions? At the end of the first season, I'm planning a panel discussion to answer your UX career questions. So if you have questions, please email me at hello@uxpursuit.com, and we'll do our best to cover them in the final episode of the season. Lastly, a big thanks to Irene Barber, a fellow UXer, for creating all the music you hear on the podcast. Be sure to check out her music under the artist name Nearby on Spotify or at nearbymusic.bandcamp.com. Again, thanks so much for listening. I'm Tim Bridgham, a senior UX researcher, and this is UX Pursuit.
I looked at your questions and I'm curious to where this is going to go. You're gonna edit this down and make me sound really cool, right?
Exactly.